the other day, um, Joe Biden gave his State of the Union address, and during the State of the Union address, Lauren Bobich and Marjorie Trader Greene decided they were going to heckle him, and it backfired on them. Um, but Bobich and Trader Greene tried and failed to start a build the wall chant in the House chamber, which backfired. Now, President Biden gave his first State of the Union address against the backdrop of the all out war that we're facing in Europe, vowing to make Russian President Vladimir Putin pay the price for his brutal invasion of Ukraine and listing his domestic priorities before his speech was disrupted by Republican rancor. Now, Biden used his address in Congress to reset his stalled domestic agenda, addressing inflation concerns, renewing his call for gun control legislation, and touting the qualifications of the Supreme Court nominee um, Ketanji Brown Jackson. I'm not sure if I'm saying the first name right, but the crisis in Ukraine overshadowed this event. Many lawmakers had wore Ukrainian flag lapel pins, or lapel, whatever, and blue and yellow clothing in a show of bipartisan support, at least before the night was ultimately disrupted by overly partisan overly partisan heckling from Representatives Lauren Bobich and Marjorie Trader Greene, who basically have never accomplished anything in their life. Now, Bobich and Trader Greene interrupted Biden's speech as he discussed the border policy to start a brief build the wall, and they tried to start a brief build the wall chant that received no support from anyone else in the chamber. Later in the speech, Biden discussed his administration's efforts to help troops and veterans affected by toxic burn pits, noting that health ailments like cancer had put them in the flag-draped coffins. Now, Bobich had heckled Biden, shouting that you put them in there, 13 of them, apparently referring to the 13 service members who died during Biden's withdrawal from Afghanistan moments before the current president began discussing his son Beau, who had served in Iraq as an army officer, and he died of cancer in 2015. Now, Bobich's interruption was met with a chorus of boos. Biden kicked off his speech with a warning to Putin and a message of support for Ukraine, calling on Congress to approve billions in military and humanitarian aid as Russian missiles rained down in civilian areas. Biden also said that the U.S. would ban Russian aircraft from its airspace amid a slew of sanctions aimed at crippling the country's economy. We're coming for your ill-gotten gains, he said, vowing to target Russian oligarchs' yachts and assets, but Biden warned Americans to prepare for potential economic pain at home as a result of this war. Now, throughout our history of what we've seen and what we've learned this lesson here. Dictators do not pay a price for their aggression. They cause more chaos, Biden said. They keep moving forward, and the costs and threats to America and the world just keep rising and rising. Now, Biden's guests for the event included Oksana Marakova, who is Ukraine's ambassador to the U.S. She and also they received a lengthy standing ovation. Now, the president touted the heroism of Ukraine's troops and citizens and the near universal support for the country from the international community. 6 days ago, Russia's President Vladimir Putin sought to shake the foundations of the free world, thinking that he could make it bend to his menacing ways. But he badly miscalculated that, Biden said. He thought that he could roll into Ukraine and the world would roll over. Instead, he met a wall of strength he had never imagined. He met the fucking Ukrainian people. Still, Biden reserved his promise not to send U.S. troops to help fight the Russian troops, vowing that our forces are not engaged and they will not engage in any conflict with the Russian forces in Ukraine. The bipartisan support for Biden's fiery rhetoric is on Ukraine quickly fizzled when Biden sought to tout the success of his pandemic relief bill, which drew boos from Republicans as he drew a contrast with former squatter Donald Trump's lone major piece of legislation. Unlike the $2 trillion tax cut that was passed in the previous administration that benefited the top 1% of Americans, the American Rescue Plan helped working people, and it left no one behind, Biden said. Biden also touted the bipartisan infrastructure bill he signed, taking another jab at Trump. We're done talking about infrastructure for infrastructure weeks. We're talking about an infrastructure decade, he said. The crisis in Ukraine has upended the administration's domestic plans, which were already on life support anyway, but Biden's agenda has stalled since last year after closet Republicans, Senator Joe Manchin Kirsten Sinema have basically received deep money pockets from Republicans. Manchin notably sat on the Republican side during the president's address, but Biden sought to reset his effort to pass a big spending bill, which he no longer described as Build Back Better, but he urged Congress to overcome party frictions and approve popular components of the plan, such as lowering the prescription drug costs, cutting energy and child care costs, and funding for affordable housing. Biden also called on Congress to increase the minimum wage to $15 an hour, if not higher, and to enact paid family leave and extend the child tax credit and pass the PRO Act to help working families. He called on Congress to pass legislation to make corporations start paying their fair share and increase taxes on the wealthy to pay for the party's agenda. He said his plan will not only lower costs and give families a fair shot, it will lower the deficit. He said the previous administration not only ballooned the deficit for very wealthy corporations, but it undermined the watchdogs, the job of those to keep pandemic relief funds being wasted. Biden also announced that the Justice Department would appoint a special prosecutor to target the pandemic fraud. The watchdogs are back, he said, but we are going to go after the criminals who stole billions of relief money that was meant for small businesses and millions of Americans. The President Joe Biden also used the speech to address economic and crime concerns, issues that threaten to complicate his party's chances in the upcoming fall midterms to his poll numbers as they continue to fall. But under fire from Republicans over rising inflation, Biden called on Congress to pass his bill to expand the production of microchips and other products in the U.S., which he said would lower cost and not the wages. Now, one way to fight inflation is to drive down wages and make Americans poorer. But we have a better plan to fight inflation, he said. Lower your costs, not your wages. Make more cars and semiconductors in America. More infrastructure and innovation in America. More goods moving faster and cheaper in America. More jobs where you can earn a good living in America. And instead of relying on foreign supply chains, let's make everything here in America. Biden blamed corporate greed for stiffing the competition and contributing to widespread price increases, announcing a crackdown on companies overcharging American businesses and consumers. He also touted his administration's COVID-19 response, commending the CDC for easing the masking guidelines and announcing a new round of free home COVID tests in the administration plans to send out to anyone who requested them. He also announced a test-to-treat initiative so that people who test positive for COVID at pharmacies can receive the antiviral pills at no cost to you. Basically, he said he could not promise a new variant will not come, but he promised that he can do everything within their power to be ready if it does. Biden also highlighted his administration's support for police officers in an apparent attempt to undercut the frequent Republican claims that Democrats want to defund the police, which they don't. Now, calling for local governments to use COVID relief funds to hire more cops and increase police over time in response to rising crime rates in some cities. Now, let's not abandon the streets or choose between safety and equal justice, but let's come together to protect the communities. Let's restore trust and hold our law enforcement accountable, he said, but the answer is not to defund the police, it is to basically give funding to the police. Biden renewed his call for Congress to pass gun safety legislation, including universal background checks, a ban on assault weapons and high-capacity magazines, and a repeal of the liability shield that protects gun manufacturers from liability in the shootings. He also called out the Republican-led states that have passed legislation, not only to suppress the vote, but to subvert the entire election. He urged Congress to pass voting rights, the voting right legislations to preserve the most fundamental rights in America. Biden later said in the speech he praised retiring Supreme Court Justice Stephen Breyer and lauded Jackson as one of our nation's legal minds, with support from a raft of conservative groups. Now, underscoring the division in both parties, Biden's speech was not only met with traditional Republican responses from Iowa, like the Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds, but also an American First response from Greene, who recently headlined a white nationalist conference. Democrats also aired three different responses, including a progressive response from Representative Rashida Tlaib from Michigan, a Congressional Black Caucus response from Representative Colin Allred, a Democrat from Texas, and a response sponsored by the partisan moderate group No Labels from Representative Josh Guttheimer, who's a Democrat from New Jersey. In a speech that was heavily focused on inflation, which is an issue that Republicans plan to hammer in the midterms, Reynolds argued that Biden and Democrats have sent us back in time to the late 70s and early 80s. I think that's what Trump was trying to do. When runaway inflation was hammering families, a violent crime wave was crashing on our cities, and the Soviet Army was trying to redraw the world map. So if you like the video, you can give the video a like and subscribe to my channel, RBW King. And you could also hit the notification bell so that you'll be notified when a new video comes out. And if you want to support my work even further, you can donate to my Patreon link, which you can find in the About section of my YouTube channel, and where you can donate just as little as a few bucks a month. And thanks for listening.